Welcome to Birken Forest Monastery's live stream. I'm Ajahn Sona, and feel free to submit your questions in the question bar. And let us begin, Pia, with the first question.
Ajahn, our first question today is from Alex in the live stream. Dear Ajahn, you have often described how determined and uncompromising you were in your youth regarding practice. However, in your talks, you often recommend a more relaxed approach. I am a young seeker with similar strict tendencies, putting forth enormous amounts of effort to overcome defilements, which is useful to a certain degree. Would you recommend that I lower my exertion? What would you recommend to your younger self? It seems like the Buddha himself encouraged a take-no-prisoners approach to Dhamma practice.
Yeah, it depends on the individual. And that means that, I can't give you a general answer having not met you or know your personality type. People have all kinds of reasons. Just outside of spiritual practice, before I was a monk, I was a classical musician, and one thing that classical musicians have to do is, practice scales and a huge amount of physical practice in order to play the instruments. And you see it there as well. People who practice a lot but not effectively, people who practice driven by fear and neurosis, people have all kinds of reasons for working long hours, or they're trying to prove their worth to themselves, or they're hoping others will accept that they're that they're worthy of respect, or things like that. So there are all kinds of ulterior motives for doing hard practice. This is talked about in the suttas as well. There are a list of 13 permissible kind of extra ascetic practices, and they are allowable but not mandatory. Such things as not lying down to sleep. That means what we usually call it sitter's practice, where you down altogether. It doesn't mean that you don't sleep, but you'd have to sleep sitting up. It's quite demanding. Eating just once a day. Eating only from alms rounds, just whatever you're given on alms round. And that can be certainly in the 5th century BC in India, it could be just rice, Even in my times in the northeast of Thailand, quite often the alms round would be nothing but rice, Spending time in an open, sort of a corpse depository where people would abandon dead bodies, staying there. We don't have too many of those around now. We just have cemeteries, which is actually a very nice place to practice usually. Yeah. So the extraordinary practices need to be done with a certain mindset, and it mentions this in the commentaries that monks should never be showing off, or lay people that are practicing hard, they should never be showing off. They should be the purpose of this is primarily for simplicity rather than hardship. It's, if you don't even need a bed, well, life gets simple. If you need just one meal a day of whatever gets you by, life is simpler, isn't it? So these energy practices and the things are, to improve the quality of your life and practice. There are side effects. Sometimes the body is stressed a bit, but not too much. So the Buddha had given up the extreme practices of his earlier days. Remember, that as a bodhisattva, he was starving himself near death and things like that. So he definitely said that is not a good thing to do. So when you do these extra energetic practices, you have to make sure that you're not injuring yourself in any way. This it's very also nice to have the supportive community in doing these practices. It's like other areas of life, though. Some people really are self-motivated, and they don't need others to help them along. So, we have what's called diet clubs, where people join a club to diet. Like, what on earth does it have to do with anybody else's diet? You're on a diet. How would a club help you? Well, it does, apparently. Others don't need to join a club to diet. They just diet. And same with the spiritual world. But a lot of people miscalculate their capacities and underestimate the determination to carry these things out. And they're also not able to self-assess. So this is why interaction and community and etc. helps you understand what you should be doing from the voice of experienced people. So that's the general answer, because I can't specifically answer for your particular personality type. Well, just before we go on to the next question, I just want to mention something. I gave a talk on YouTube, on the YouTube channel, a video a couple of years back called "Life is the Game That Must Be Played." And it was about this event that happened in South America. A Uruguayan rugby team crashed in the Andes Mountains in a plane crash. And they spent several months surviving there in the high Andes. Barely, and many of them didn't survive. And I thought the incident was very interesting as a kind of almost a story about the modern world, especially in the West. And I gave a whole long talk. It was a 45, 50-minute talk on that. And so just recently it's been drawn to my attention that there's a movie out called Society of the Snows, which is a movie based on this incident. And it's a foreign language, unless you're Spanish speaking. It's in Spanish, but with subtitles. It's very well made, and it may be up for an Academy Award or something like that. Anyway, it's not the movie thing or the gripping adventure, but if you want to relate it to a larger meaning, please watch the Life is the Game That Must Be Played, which is on our YouTube channel here. I have lots of views from previous time, but now this whole event is the accurate way. I'm not interested in the actual, the precise details of the incident, but I'm interested in kind of the symbolic meaning behind it. Normally, people might interpret a story, if it was a fiction novel about a rugby team that crashed in the Andes and in fact had to end up cannibalizing some of their frozen dead comrades. You would have an analysis of a fictional story, but this is an actual event. So I've analyzed this actual event as symbolic, almost as if it was fiction, and has meaning to it. So watch the Life is the Game That Must Be Played. So that's a little commercial for for another talk that I've given. So let us go on, Pia, with the next question.
The next question is from Sebastian in Berlin, Germany. Dear Ajahn, out of the 5 hindrances, doubt seems to be the most severe one because it blocks us from stream entry. I have no trouble believing the Buddha regarding rebirth, the law of kamma, and the 5 realms of existence, but I really struggle hard when reading the Agganna Sutta. Taking the Buddha seriously, I must reject the theory of evolution, a theory which I find to be quite compelling and plausible. Any advice on how to deal with that?
Well, the Agganna Sutta is in the longer length sayings, and it is more or less a history of the development of the world system, but it shouldn't be taken too scientifically or literally. It's primarily a lesson in it's a moral lesson. It's a lesson with a moral teaching behind it. The decline and rising of societies and individuals is to do with their capacity to understand the nature of virtue, the rise and fall of things. So, in a sense, it's evolutionary that things get better evolutionarily when you have a grasp of virtuous behavior, of generosity, kindness, and clarity. And when stinginess, cruelty, and delusion take over, things go downhill rapidly. Every aspect of human life, and indeed the environment around it, is affected by this. So the causal structure of the improvement of the quality of life is sort of told in a sort of universal way with the Agganna Sutta. Primarily, always remember that the primary teaching of the Buddha virtually exclusively is that there is suffering and there is an end to it. So just 2 of the 4 truths. His teaching, when he summarizes it, is just there is suffering in human life, of course in animal life as well, and there is it doesn't have to be there. There is a way out of this suffering. It's unnecessary. And then he's gracious enough to give some pointers. The Eightfold Path is a number of suggested practices and attitudes that would help one overcome this suffering. And that's really the whole intent. So when you have scientific information that is in tension or in contradiction with this, it's all right. You don't have to accept it as some sort of factual account of the history of the universe. As far as the evolutionary theory, of course, it's very, very persuasive and has lots of aspects which seem to be confirmed. It may, the way I see it is, yes, the history of the planet as uncovered by archaeologists and paleontologists and biologists and physicists, that's good information. However, all scientific theories are provisional and are subject to alteration if new information comes along. And in fact, more or less, this is where we get into a little bit of philosophy of science, is that, and I tend to agree with this, this idea that you can never actually demonstrate the final truth of a scientific theory, but you can falsify it. You can show it that it's wrong but you can't ultimately declare this is true and is final. Science is a process and a method. So and you can see the evolution of evolutionary theory. I'm not a denialist of any of this stuff. I'm very interested in scientific ideas and investigations. But the theory of evolution keeps evolving. And new information comes in, and new precision and depths of understanding that have not been there before. The primary thing is, does the theory of rebirth and karma conflict with the theory of evolution? I don't think so. I think that there is naturalistic, and there are laws that's described by the Buddha. We call it bija niyama, or the laws of like seeds. And these are biological laws. They saw very clearly that if you take a seed from a pine tree and then drop it in the ground, a pine tree grows, and it doesn't grow up as a Bodhi tree. A Bodhi tree is going to grow up as a Bodhi tree. And with animals, a tiger doesn't give birth to a bear. It always gives birth to a tiger. And so and people look like their parents. You have your father's nose, your mother's ankles. So they were quite aware of biological inheritance, and they also have a much more sense of fluidity of the species as well. Christianity has, why was evolution so disturbing to Christianity? Is because the Bible has a very short version of history of the planet, and it also has the idea of a fixed species, so that God creates a species and it's fixed. Deer don't change into kangaroos, and whereas Buddhism never did have that. They have an enormously being can morph into another being, and that the morphing, the change of structures, has laws behind it. Biological laws, physical laws, psychological laws, and this other law called karma, a moral law which is pervasive and alters the physics, the biological aspects of beings as well. And these laws are all interacting. It's a very sophisticated version of how things work. And it's very causal. There is no attribution of God just playing with things and creating things out of nothing. It's the universe has a series of complex laws which interact with each other. Physics, which is called utu niyama. Biology, which is called bija niyama. Psychology, which is called citta niyama. And then another sort of moral dimension which affects all the other laws as well, and called kamma niyama. And an overarching vision of how these four laws would interact, and that's called Dhamma niyama, the laws of truth, or the overarching organic law. So it's very sophisticated, and Buddhism is not in denial of evolution. It just would say that evolution is certainly apparent and moves, but all of the aspects of evolutionary theory may not be accounted for. And we would say that somehow rebirth and kamma are playing into the evolutionary process as well. So that's a brief description of that. So let's go on, Pia, with the next question.
The next question is from the live stream from Upasaka Mustafa. Dear Ajahn, I sometimes practice slowing down my breath to 2 long breaths per minute by accepting the dukkha caused by slowing the breath. This quickly calms the mind, but I'm worried that the ego may stop breathing by overcoming dukkha. Is it possible for life faculty to be harmed or be broken by this practice?
Some schools of yoga, systematically regulate breathing. So some of the, like Iyengar yoga is, you're doing postures and holding your breath. You're exhaling and holding the breath out, and then you're inhaling and holding the breath in while you're doing these stretching postures. And that's a kind of an artificial way of calming the mind. Actually, it works quite well. But Buddhism does not do that. Buddhism is not yoga. And Buddhism, well, if it's a yoga, it's called a Raja Yoga, or just the yoga of the mind. So the breathing, the regulation of breathing is not done through forcing the breath. I mean, you can take a few deep breaths and inhale and exhale, etc. But the instructions on breath meditation, anapanasati, does not talk about regulating the breath physically. There's a few Buddhist teachers, I think Ajahn Buddhadasa, that talks about regulating the breath a little bit, but there's no indication really of regulating the breath. It's being aware of the inhalations and exhalations, whether they're long or short, etc. But what the commentaries talk about, and I don't think this is in the suttas, but the commentaries, such as the Visuddhimagga, talks about and the Vimuttimagga. You should be aware that these are the larger or major commentaries. The Vimuttimagga is earlier than the Visuddhimagga. I really like the Vimuttimagga. I prefer it over the Visuddhimagga, and there is extensive editions now, corrected editions of this Vimuttimagga. And you will see that the breath, breathing slows down, but it's not because you're regulating it. It's because the mind is entering a state of reduced discursive activity. Also, a more lucid. It's abandoning the hindrances of, anger and distress and agitation and so forth. It's abandoning these activities which cause the breaths per minute to accelerate. So an angry person or a really confused person will be breathing very rapidly. You'll notice this. This is a medical thing where you can see that people in distress and certain conditions have rapid breathing, rapid shallow breathing. And a person, as they become calmer and more serene, the breathing settles down. But the activities of the brain don't usually go into these extraordinary levels. And so breathing remains something between 12 and 17 breaths per minute for the ordinary person. Now, as one practices meditation and starts to access the more serene types of meditation, breaths per minute slow down. It's one of the best ways to have an objective sign that you are merging into these samadhi experiences, the serene experiences of the eighth factor of the Eightfold Path, is that the number of breaths per minute decline. Now, all that they could say in the commentaries were that the breath becomes slower because they didn't have precise time instruments like a watch or a clock. They didn't have the second. They didn't have a minute. They had interesting time measurements like the finger snap or one squeeze of a cow's udder, which would be like a few seconds. They they don't have any precise time instruments to measure the number of respirations per minute or anything like this. So in modern times, we do. So I would say that it seems that an indication of samadhi would produce maybe 2 to 3 breaths per minute versus the ordinary respiration rate of, say, 12 to 17 breaths per minute. But it's not forced. It's just the side effect of the serenity, and there's no danger in it whatsoever. But if you're holding your breath and forcing it and everything, there may not be any real danger in that. Your body will just naturally take over. If you try to stop, you hold your breath for a long time, eventually your body just takes over and makes you breathe. By the way, you can see the extremities which physical application of this can go to. These people do this unaided deep sea diving, where they're just holding the breath. And the breath, it seems like the record for holding the breath is something up to 15 minutes. But that would require oxygenation beforehand and a lot of deep breathing and everything. But certainly 9 and 10 minutes, people like holding their breath for 9 or 10 minutes is possible. Most people can't hold it for more than a minute, But you can, these people aren't yogis or anything like that. They're just training their body physiologically and learning how to do this. But you can see a great variation in this. But that's a forced physiological thing. This is strictly a psychological side effect or physiological side effect of the serene mind, the reduction of breathing per breaths per minute. Okay, well, we're getting into a lot of science here, aren't we? There's a lot of biology and science and history and stuff, aren't we? Okay, let's go on today.
Our next question from the live stream is from Johan in Sweden. Dear Ajahn, I'm curious about how the jhanas affect one's karma and rebirth. It is said that a human life is favorable for practice, since it's easy to get lost in the pleasures of the higher realms, only to fall down sooner or later. But if you are a sotapanna, then is there any danger of taking rebirth in higher realms?
No, there is some distortion of the idea that that human life is supposed to be better for attaining enlightenment than the life in the deva realms, what you might call the heavenly realms, because the heavenly realms are they're lacking in any kind of explicit suffering, so you tend to forget about the urgency of the movement out of samsara. But it seems when you look at the suttas that there are in those realms, those deva realms, that there are enlightened beings there that become aware of the situation of their impermanence, even of the heavenly realms. Now, in the Christian world, heaven is thought to be eternal, and to bring up the idea for somebody who is absolutely convinced they're going to have the eternal afterlife and they're safe forever, the Buddhist notion that even the heavens are impermanent is chilling and disturbing to that philosophy, that religious conviction. But that seems to be the case. I want to compare that to modern astrophysics. We're really into the science today. So even in the time of Einstein, his idea of the universe, and it was just fairly conventional idea, was that the universe possibly is eternal, and also that it's fixed. It's not expanding or contracting or anything like this. And it was only in the 1930s that they started to observe through enhanced telescopes that the idea that the universe is expanding. And because of this idea that the universe is expanding, they ran the film in reverse, or just metaphorically ran it in reverse, and they come to the conclusion that the universe had a beginning in the Big Bang, and that it's expanding, and that suns and stars and so forth are also not certainly not eternal. They actually have lifespans and so forth. So that's a shift, a paradigm shift in the idea that scientists have about the universe, that it indeed, although it's said to be almost 14 billion years old, this cycle of the universe is said to be 14 billion years old. It is continuously changing, and in fact, galaxies and items within it, like suns and the various stars and so forth, are collapsing or expanding or exploding or turning into dust, and all these things are taking place. Now, this is a new view of the universe. It's not eternal. It is not static. It's not fixed. And this is kind of like the Buddhist idea of things. In fact, the Buddhist descriptions of the universe are exactly that, with even more extended time periods than we have in modern astrophysics. So this corresponds with this consciousness plane of the angelic consciousness plane, or the deva realms. These are realms that you enter through the structure of your consciousness, by the way. So in some of the religions, the Christian religion and so forth, it's not specifically that you qualify because of your purity to enter heaven. It's your, more or less, your faith in Jesus or the resurrection of Christ or whatever. It's often that which gets you into heaven. From a Buddhist point of view, it's not about faith or any of this joining a club or anything like this, or any external, like baptism or any of this, does not determine what happens to you at death. What determines it is the condition of your consciousness at the time of death, and that is influenced by your moral status, or the purification of your consciousness, and that is a matter of personal self-effort and self-development. So the heavens, from a Buddhist point of view, are stations of consciousness, but you shouldn't think of them that they're mere metaphors or stories about consciousness, but don't have any real correspondence. They're both. They're both the purification of consciousness, which you can see that in this very life, there are people at different stages of consciousness. And some people are walking around in a very blissful condition, very refined, and their very face is transformed by their ethical standard. And others are dwelling at a very animalistic, in terms of humans, they're dwelling at an almost demonic or animalistic state of consciousness. And you can see this right before your eyes. Some would say that, yes, that is the case, but that's nothing to do with what happens when you die. Buddhism would say, yes, it's got everything to do with what happens when you die. The refined consciousness continues. The degenerate consciousness continues in its problematic condition. So it's not a problem. If you attain sotapanna, the first stage of enlightenment, then you're bound for glory. You don't have much to worry about anymore. It's just a matter of time before you finish this infinite journey in samsara. It's coming to an end. And it may end in heavens, or it may end in the human realm, etc. But it won't end below the human realm. So here's one thing that is very often repeated. If one attains to the first stage of enlightenment, one is never reborn below the human realm. Never. Okay, let us go on.
Next question from the live stream is from Chris. Hello, dear Ajahn Sona. Thanks for sharing your wisdom. I'm wondering how long I should extend a helping hand to my son who is struggling with addiction. Sometimes he falls back into his old ways.
Well, I often have to give advice to parents about their children, and sometimes their children are coming and complaining to them about how they were raised and all this kind of stuff. But the advice I give is that you advise them to seek a psychologist or a religious structure, like a monk or somebody like that, or whatever religion that they can get a hold of, to deal with their issues, because you're not a psychologist or a monk or a priest. You're their mother or your father, their father. If they want you to, maybe you can help them find such a person, a psychologist or a therapist or a rehab center. You know, look it up on Google for them, whatever, or drive them over there. That's about what you can do. And so you're not asked to, like, if they're befuddled about the reality of the universe, the Big Bang or something like that, you're not a physicist either. So if you recommend that they go to university and take physics. But if they're they want mathematical training, you're the wrong person, unless you happen to be a mathematician or something. You send them to the people who, my own, in terms of raising you, I did the best I could, considering what I knew. But if you want good advice, if you're an addict, and if you're an addict, you really do need good advice. You really do need. This is something you got to tell them. It's not okay. If you're depending on drugs for your well-being, it's just not okay. And all I can do is encourage you to find qualified help to get you out of this. And usually the parent is not qualified. They can be of great patience and goodwill, but it's not what they do. They can look up a psychiatrist, a rehab center, a psychologist, a therapist, maybe recommend a religion or something, but that's what you do. And then you live your life, because it's not their lives, especially once they're over the age of about 18 or something, they're responsible for their lives. And that's another thing you need to reinforce, is like, it's not me that's going to suffer from this, it's you. And you're the one that has to fix it. And you need help. And I'm not the one qualified to give you the help. So that's how you look at it. And each being is responsible for their actions. So this is the core teaching of the Buddha, is that it's not somebody else isn't making the decisions. You're making the decisions, and you're going to get the results of your decisions. So you have to emphasize that with them. It's not me that will get the negative results. If you take a contaminated drug or overdose or something, it's not me that did that, it's you. You will get the results. So face your personal responsibilities and get help. So that's how to think about it.
Next question from the live stream is from Random Ramblings in Seattle, Washington. Regarding AN 7.71, Bhāvanāsutta, committed to development, what are the 4 kinds of mindfulness meditation, the 4 bases of psychic power, and the 5 faculties?
Well, I'm glad you asked, because it so happens that I have given complete teachings on all of those and more. And those are part of the package which are called The 37 Requisites of Enlightenment. And I gave a series of 12 talks, is it? 12 talks? Last May, I think I did. And we recorded all of them, and now nine or 10, how's it, 9 up? 9 of them are up. The last 3 are still being edited, and they will be available. But I will, and of course, the 4 foundations, the 4 mindfulness practices are the 4 foundations of powers of the mind, are actually rarely taught, but I do give a full hour-long talk on that. And what was the last one? Faculties. Both the 5 faculties and the 5 powers are identical, and they are faith, energy, mindfulness, concentration, and wisdom are the 5 faculties, and they also become the 5 powers. But that's a very rich field, and I give a full, extensive talk on that. So that's what is cryptically, in a very brief thing just mentioned in that little description in the Anguttara Nikaya. They're referring to, the person is referring to the numbered sayings. So when you read these things, they're very brief, and if you don't have an extensive idea about the rest of the Pali Canon, you're going to be curious about these things. But those are very mainstream topics, and I have given full talks on it. So check out the series, 9 of which have been put up on the 37 Requisites of Enlightenment. Yes.
Next question from the live stream is from Thought Fog in Marquette. My question is, do you allow dogs? What are the specifications? I have written a list of 108 reasons why I should be able to have my dog in the Zendo here. So I'm just looking for inspiration.
Yeah, be careful what you wish for, because everybody will bring their dog. You'll have doggy daycare at the Zendo. If you can bring your dog, why can't they bring their cat? I had a woman who wanted to bring the horse here, and she did. I like horses. In some of the Asian monasteries, certainly the dogs are around, not only around, but 50 dogs. And they are barking and howling and fighting, and the monks are so nice and tolerant and feeding them and taking care of them and everything, and it's a distressing mess. But usually in the more meditative monasteries, they discourage the animals being in the monastery. So animals are interpenetrated with human life in many ways, especially in forest monasteries. You notice that when we do this live stream that one of the animals that is featured is a moose. So we allow moose here. They're usually very well behaved, very calm. You rarely hear any noise out of the moose. We're already just surrounded by the wild version of dogs. Here we are surrounded by coyotes and packs of coyotes howling like tortured opera singers in the night. They're just screaming. Birds are everywhere. They're just. We have a season here where they arrive at the monastery from the south, and they set up a clamor. It is a Tarzan movie. It is. The ducks and the geese are clamoring. Look up the word if you don't understand what I'm saying. It's a continuous war of territory. They are making lots of noise. So animal life is interpenetrated with monasteries, but we really are here. We're not here to set up a animal hospital or anything like that. We are here to practice in a very sincere way, and we have little time for this, and we need some control over the environment. So I forbid dogs to come to this monastery. I forbid cats to come to the monastery. I forbid any animals to be brought to the monastery. And occasionally we have, over the years, adopted a cat, etc. But I really do not. It has not worked out well. Aside from the fact that there are people who are allergic to dogs and allergic to cats, and there are people who are afraid of dogs and afraid of cats. Like, this is preference to humans, not to animals. So I can fully understand your Zendo if they won't let you bring the dog there. But if you like to meditate, I mean, it's a dog is a great companion, a good meditation buddy. So go out to the parks with the dog, meditate in your living room with your cats. Lots of people meditate with cats. Cats love meditation. Feel free at home, but don't impose that on anybody else. Yeah. Okay, let's go on.
Mm-hmm. Our next question is from, pardon me, I lost my space, from Charlie in the Czech Republic. Dear Ajahn, the great Thai forest masters were mostly very unorthodox in their views. For example, citta outside the khandas, etc. Yet when they speak about the Dhamma, there is a strong flavor of direct realization and deepest insights. Western monks are mostly very orthodox in their views, but their knowledge seems way more theoretical and somewhat lacking in authenticity. What do you make of this paradox?
Well, a part of this is also just cultural. Westerners, there's two types of Westerners. One is arrogant Westerners who are have a superiority complex, a racist complex towards Asia. They think they can figure it all out in themselves. And then there's the other, which is a kind of reverse racism or ethnic thing where you're convinced that people from Thailand or Sri Lanka or something are intrinsically more Dhammic than you. Somehow they access, there's a cultural or a racist basis, or some Westerners would even see Western monks as kind of culturally appropriating some other culture. Shouldn't monks be Western? Occasionally I have a funny encounter with, say, a Christian, fundamentalist evangelical Christian that happens to be Vietnamese or Korean or something like that. And they're trying to push Christianity on me. I mean, I was raised as an Anglican kid. I got 7 attendance pins from the Anglican Church, and I often say to them humorously, because I'm not interested in Christianity. I say to them, we got into the wrong bodies. You should be in my body, and I should be in your body because you're Asian, and that should be Buddhist, and I'm Western, I should be Christian. Is that right? So anyway, it's all nonsense. And I have given some talks recently about history, and one of the things I'm emphasizing is that Western monks are in the robes in a very, very early in Buddhist history. They're the second ethnic race in the robes. After the North Indians, from Magadha, the area that the Buddha lived in. The next ones in the robes are actually Greek immigrants and possibly also Iranian immigrants, Persian immigrants, before Buddhism actually goes to places like Sri Lanka even, which is one of the earliest places that Buddhism went outside of India. They went to Sri Lanka at the time of Ashoka, about 250 BC. The history of Sri Lanka records the arrival of Indian monks and nuns from the Indian mainland. But before that, are the presence of Greek monks in the robes. So Western monks have been in the robes certainly before it went to what is called Myanmar now, or Thailand, or China, or any of these places. People from European extraction, the Greeks are Europeans, were in the robes. And they were very appreciative because Buddhism has a very rational element to it, and is very conducive to Western patterns of thought and philosophy. Also, the language of Buddhism, that is Pali, and the earlier sort of vernacular around North India, is very similar in its construction to Greek and Latin. These are all related languages. They're polysyllabic languages, and they have grammatical connections. In fact, some of the words are identical. And so when a Westerner who speaks English or some of the European languages comes to Buddhism, and begins to read the Pali suttas, they can take them up quite easily. It's very different than the Thai language, which tends to be monosyllabic and tonal, and is has different contexts and ideas. So the original sense of the Buddhism and the language that it's used in is quite amenable, quite easily accessed by a European language and training of the mind, rational training of the mind as well. However, because we were there as monks training, you have a great, you learn to be appreciative of these teachers who are willing to teach you and do not have to teach you. It's not quite like university in the West. I think university in the West, in the earlier decades, you were quite a humble student and appreciative, and then now it's more arrogance, But so the Western monks are very careful not to blow up their ideas of their own attainments and so forth, which is proper Buddhist attitude. The monks from the northeast of Thailand, the forest tradition, are a kind of a reform order where they're really practicing for nibbana, and they're speaking out of their own experience of deep practice as well. And that's quite rare, actually, even in the Asian Buddhist world. Many monks are not really practicing for liberation. They're scholars or just practitioners of rituals and chanting and so forth, and they're not expecting really to attain enlightenment or even samadhi or jhanas or anything like that. They might not meditate, It might be a surprise to those who are listening that I would say the vast majority of present-day ordained monks throughout Asia do not meditate. So that tradition in the Northeast is, although they're sometimes unconventional in terms of their sutta references or their abhidhamma references, etc., they are really dedicated practitioners. But you should not underestimate the commitment that the Western monks who have practiced in that tradition have. Now, a number of us, or some of us, are past 50 years as monks in the robes, and lots of us have more than 20, 30, and so forth. We have spent at least more than half of our lives in the robes, training and educating ourselves and practicing. So we've been very careful not to be, boastful or anything like that. But there is a very good quality of Dhamma understanding in the West. We should not have the idea that we're kind of borrowing from another culture, that we're imitating another culture. We're not. This goes back in history to the very earliest times, and this is why I do make these studies of history to show that people, you got the wrong idea. Europeans were Buddhist monks in the earliest time of the Buddha. And these ideas are not, and as the Buddha would say, this is not a racist teaching. This is not for a particular group of people. This is for everybody and anybody who can understand it. And they should be given full equality and respect for this. Okay, I think we have time for one more question.
Our final question today is from the live stream from Starscream. Ajahn, I have no desire to work for worldly gains anymore. Am I lazy? How do I remove the stain of laziness and continue being of service to the world and myself?
Well, I don't know, because you haven't given me enough information. Are you don't desire to work? Is it because you can't get out of bed, or is it because you just don't have worldly desires? I congratulate you if you don't have worldly desires, but if you're having trouble getting out of bed, then you're just lazy. So get over your laziness if that's the case, but if you're actually just not really interested in money or all those kind of stuff anymore, that I congratulate you, and that you should use your time to reflect. And obviously you're on a question board here with a Buddhist monk. You're an inquirer, you're a seeker, you're interested in the philosophical or the spiritual practices. You're apparently interested in Buddhism, etc. So I congratulate you. And by the nature of the Buddhist teachings, it's designed to weaken your worldly interests. So don't be surprised that it's happening. That means that you're succeeding. Okay, well, that is it for today. Now, this is the third time we've done a 9 a.m. Q&A, and we will continue in this time slot because we had a vote around the world, and the 9 a.m.s were in the majority over the 4 p.m.s. What was the statistic? I think it was 55 to 45 in favor of 9 a.m. So we'll continue this time slot as far as we can see in the next upcoming months. Yeah.